Good morning. Welcome to Lake Street Church of Evanston. Whether you are with us every week, if you're joining us online or in person, if this is your first time ever in a church or listening to a church service, no matter what your body looks like or who you love, I hope that you will feel at home here with us at Lake Street Church. My name is Jillian Westerfield, and I'm the Associate Minister. And today, we don't always read our native lands acknowledgement out loud, but in honor of tomorrow being Indigenous Peoples Day, I thought this would be a good time to do that. So if you want to flip over on the back of your bulletin, you can read along with me. This is the land of the Council of Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa. This land also served as an important meeting place for Miami, Ho-Chunk, and the Menominee, Anoka, Sac, Fox, Peoria, Arapaho, and Cheyenne, and other tribal nations. Outside the front door of the church, the original shoreline of Lake Michigan once stood. The land Lake Street Church of Evanston currently inhabits was used by many Indigenous people as a gathering, trading, and ritual space. Nearby, on Ridge Avenue, there existed a trail that led all the way up to Green Bay, Wisconsin. This land was seized by white settlers as part of the wave of settler colonialism and genocide that constituted the eventual United States. We, as Lake Street Church of Evanston, acknowledge our ongoing participation in these legacies and commit ourselves to a deeper understanding and action. This land was also the site of further white supremacy and racism, a legacy which we also name today. Over time, Evanston's Black citizens have been systemically excluded opportunities. One result of these compounded inequities, sorry y'all, is today's tremendous wealth gap between Black and white residents. Most regrettably, with a few notable exceptions, white faith communities allowed the inequitable policies and practices to persist without resistance, while even participating and benefiting from them. Disparities continue to this day, and we join other faith communities that are stepping forward to respond. In accordance with our covenant to act against injustice and for peace, Lake Street Church supports the City of Evanston's current efforts to address this injustice through its reparations program. Blessed be.
Please join me in the call to worship. Sacred wind, come blow on us.
Let us feel your presence.
Holy earth, anchor us.
Nourish our frames.
Illuminating fire, burn ever brighter.
Reflect your truth.
Life-giving water.
Restore and baptize us. Blessed be.
Today's first ancient witness reading is from Psalm 66, verses 1 through 12. Shout to God, all of the earth. Sing the glory of God's name. Give glorious praise. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. Your enemies cower before your great strength. The whole earth worships you and sings praises to you. All creation praises your name. Selah. Come and see the works of God. God's deeds on our behalf are wondrous. God turned the sea into dry land, and people passed through the river on foot. There we rejoiced in God, whose reign of power lasts forever, whose eyes keep watch on the nations, so that the rebellious don't exalt themselves before God. Bless the name, all you peoples. Let the sounds of God's praise be heard. God has kept us among the living and has not yet let our feet slip. For you have tested us, O God. You have refined us as silver is refined. You put us in prisons and laid burdens on our backs. You let people ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water, and you brought us to a place of abundance and space. Blessed be.
I now invite our children to continue their worship in their classrooms. The youth are invited to stay here in the worship with me. And for those of you at home and here in the service, our question today for reflection is, what is gratitude? So if you have some thoughts on what is gratitude, if you want to write them on the card, the ushers will be around to pick those up. Or if you're online, you can just type it in the chat, and I'll be able to use those in my sermon here in a few minutes.
Today's second ancient witness reading is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 men with a skin disease approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? So where are the other 9? Did none of them return to give glory to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Blessed be.
Thank you, Barb. So the cards are headed my way right now. I'm going to go ahead and start with some responses I got online. Gratitude is trying to live your authentic best self every day. It's a sincere, heart-filled thanks. A realization that the world has provided support, whether earned or not. That's a good one. It is the best attitude to live out of. Gratitude is knowing that you should be and are grateful. Being thankful for all the good things in our lives. And then gratitude is thankfulness and love. That's a really good one. We're going to hold on to that one for later. It's going to come back to us. All right, I think that's everyone online. Sorry if I missed y'all online if you're still typing. So our story this morning seems like a healing story. And there's a temptation when we have healing stories in the Bible to use disease as a metaphor for something else, which can put us in a dangerously ableist territory, right? Leprosy, or the skin disease that we call it today, now we know it as Hansen's disease, is caused by a bacteria. And people get exposed to bacteria in so many different ways. It has nothing to do with cleanliness and definitely not morality or, their life choices. Being sick or disabled is not a sign of God's anger with any of us or our ancestors. Blindness, deafness, physical and mental impairments and differences are not metaphors for spiritual or moral failings. They are complex lived realities. And I know these things seem obvious, but there are pulpits where some truly horrible theology of illness and disability has been spoken, so I think it's important to name this before we move forward. Our gospel story this morning takes place somewhere that doesn't technically exist. It says that it's in the border, the region between Samaria and Judea. And all the commentaries that I read on these verses were very eager to point out that there is no region between Samaria and Galilee, that they border each other with nothing in between. And it's possible that Luke's grasp of geography isn't great. We do see signs of this elsewhere in the book. Sometimes he's got people taking routes that just don't make sense or are physically impossible. But I want to give the author of Luke a little bit of benefit of the doubt here, because what I think this tells us is that none of the commentators that I read have much experience with borderlands, where people often have more in common with the folks just over the line than they do with a lot of the people on what would be considered their own side of it. I think it certainly helps us to understand why a group of people with leprosy living together just outside a city includes at least one Samaritan. They may be despised foreigners in Judea, but the lines can be blurrier along the border, and their shared affliction probably meant more to their daily lives than their differences did. So we've got 10 people, probably men, with leprosy, and when they see Jesus, they call out together for mercy. Usually, this is a request for alms, for money, because what else would it be, right? They're separated from the community. They can't work or care for themselves in any other way. So there's no known cure for leprosy at the time, so they have no reason to think that their circumstances are going to change ever. They're just trying to survive in the world that they know, the world that has always been. They call Jesus Master. It's the same word that the disciples use. So I think they do recognize him as the great teacher who's been traveling through their region. Maybe they've heard other healing stories. Maybe they have a little hope for the first time they can remember. So they call out to Jesus for mercy, and he tells them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." Now, this is because in the very rare times that someone recovers from leprosy, before they can go back to their community, they have to go to the priest and be told that they're clean before they can rejoin their families and their friends. It's also significant, though, because he's asking them to do something before they've seen the results, right? They're not healed yet, but he's telling them, go tell the priest that you're healed. He's asking them to act before they can see it. The text talks about faith here, but again, I think this is hope. They can take that leap of faith because they've tasted hope again. And on their way to the priest, they are healed. For someone commonly described as a physician, Luke is pretty skimpy on the medical details here, because leprosy is not just a rash, right? It can cause nerve damage, you can lose limbs, you can lose your sight, and even now, we can cure it with antibiotics, but that doesn't reverse the damage that's already been done. You're going to have those scars forever. And we do have some pretty dramatic healing stories in the Bible, right? There's ones where blindness or paralysis had been reversed, but I don't know that we've ever seen the regrowth of limbs. I'm not saying it's not possible, I just don't think that it's been described. And we also don't know the specifics of anyone's condition before the healing, right? So that's why I'm curious. It says, when he saw that he was healed, he turned back, rather than when he was healed. So I wonder if it took a little time between the healing and the seeing. Maybe some of the old scars were still there, but he realized they didn't hurt anymore. Maybe he was still carrying some of the marks of what he had been through, but the pain in his joints had eased and he could move a little more easily. And I think it's important to consider here also that being healed physically is only half the miracle. Leprosy is painful, and I'm so grateful that antibiotics are effective against it, and that people with that diagnosis today have a much better outlook than they would have back then. But compounding that agony was being forced to live outside the community, to not be able to participate in the lives of friends and families, to be pushed outside to find a way to subsist with their new community of people in the same boat. To be able to get that certification from the priests and rejoin their village was probably the bigger miracle. So I think it's more than understandable that of the 10 of them, only one turns back to give thanks and praise to God. 9 of them probably have families inside the village. Of course, they're in a hurry to get back to them. The Samaritan, the foreigner, may not. He may not have leprosy anymore, but he's still a Samaritan. So he can't just glide seamlessly into Judean life. His miracle is different from their miracle. Both his life before leprosy and after leprosy won't look like theirs. They may have been brothers in the struggle for a while, but it was easy for the others to see how their lives were bound up to each other then. Now that that's no longer the case, he wasn't at the top of their minds anymore. Maybe they would say, "Oh yeah, he's a great guy, my brother for life," but without actually treating him as a brother. Can't have him over to dinner. My uncle hates Samaritans. Can't go to his place. That neighborhood scares me. I want to spend time with him, but he just won't learn our ways. Why does he still act like a Samaritan all the time? We've helped him long enough. When is he going to help himself? Pull himself up by his sandal straps. So it's not surprising to me at all that the Samaritan is the one that turns back. And despite a couple of rhetorical questions, I don't think it's a surprise to Jesus either. Jesus knows the heart of the outcast. He shares it even. He blessed the Samaritan and tells him, "Your faith has made you well." They all got healed, right? They are all free of pain and stigma and leprosy now. 10 people asked for healing, and they got it. And they stayed healed. Nothing in the story makes us think otherwise. But one of them, already healed, turns around to give thanks and gets an additional blessing. Your faith has made you well. What does that mean? It's not about the ability to return to status quo like the others, because the Samaritan doesn't have that. I mean, he can go back to how things were before, I guess, but for him, that's probably not desirable. We've heard about faith, and we've heard about hope this morning. I think now we're talking about love, the greatest of these. The Samaritan has gratitude and joy that may sustain him in his ongoing struggle, and I think that gratitude is a form of love. Jesus never told the group to come back or to give thanks. He told them to go to the priest and show themselves so they could be given a good bill of health and rejoin their communities. And they did exactly what was asked of them. But the other person broke the rules. Overcome with joy, he rebelled. And in his rebellion, he returned to the healer to give thanks to God. And it turned out that this was the right thing to do. Breaking the rules, rebelling against what was expected, led to even greater things. In the psalm today, we hear the call to worship God for who God is, revealed in what God does. God's deeds on our behalf are wondrous, transformative. It also says that God's eyes keep watch on the nations so that the rebellious don't exalt themselves before God. So what am I doing here, calling for a rebellion? The psalm, I think, is speaking about those who would rebel against God's vision for the world. Those who would choose nationalism, partisanism, racism over the joyful, radical hospitality God calls them to. The Samaritan is rebelling for God, with God. He's not going to follow rules that mean reining in his gratitude, his wonder, his love. If the revolution doesn't have dancing, he is not trying to be part of that. Most of us in this room are not Samaritans. We mostly have more in common with the other 9. If we got through a tough time, maybe something we weren't sure we would survive as individuals or a church or a nation, maybe we would be inclined to head for the familiar, to try to go back to how things were before. But I like to think that's not how the story ended for all of them. Maybe 1 or 2 were successful at that, at putting their time of trial behind them and falling back into the old routines. Maybe, and it's awful to think about this, but it happens, maybe 1 or 2 were hardened by the whole thing. Maybe they think, I got through leprosy, why can't that other person? Why can't they just pull themselves up? But I bet a lot of them were changed for the better by the experience, because gratitude is transformative. It opens us up to a whole new way of thinking and perceiving. It helps us see those little cracks where we can get a little bit of hope in and help those around us. It helps make us more compassionate, more open to imagining a different world. Maybe some of them really did learn to treat their Samaritan friend as a brother. Maybe they committed themselves to his liberation, not only because they saw how it was bound up in their own, but simply because it was the right thing to do. To borrow a phrase from our stewardship theme song, I think each of us is built for joy. We have in our coding a propensity for gratitude and imagination and extravagant love. We can't become Samaritans if that's not our life and our experience, but we can practice the lessons of the Samaritan. We can renounce all the isms and the phobias that would keep us from action. We can commit ourselves to a joyous rebellion today and every day. Blessed be. I invite you now to share your joys and concerns on the prayer cards, which the ushers will be coming around to pick up. I invite you now to join me in the responsive call to prayer. Open unto me light for my darkness. Open unto me hope for my despair. Open unto me joy for my sorrow. Open unto me wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me tenderness for my toughness. Open unto me thyself for myself. We have prayers this morning. Thanks for an abundant life in even these troubled times. Prayers for healing for George Emmerich and for his doctors to discover the underlying issue. Prayer for our beloved partner struggling with work chaos that is overwhelming. Please bring them peace. Prayers for the healing of Catherine and her family. Prayers of gratitude. Thank you, Spirit. May the world experience gratitude. Prayers for continued healing for our granddaughter, Manal. Prayers of peace and understanding for Dick and Joan on the passing of Dick's sister, Kim. And we have prayers for Putin. I'm assuming those are prayers for mercy and or some sort of return to peace in that region. Holy One, we lift up these and all the unspoken concerns, all those that are close to our hearts. We lift them up to you that we may experience your peace and your transformation as close as our very next breath. In your name, amen. And now I invite Mimi, I believe, to offer our moment for stewardship.
Good morning. My name is Mimi Roeder, and I am the chair of this year's Stewardship Committee. I'm here to ask you to make an annual pledge to LSC to support our community life and church life. I've been thinking a lot lately about sharing and not sharing. Thank you. I've been thinking a lot lately about sharing and not sharing and how these concepts play out in our households and our church life. A few facts about me that I promise will make stewardship sense at the end of my time here. I'm the oldest of my siblings. I was born in 1963. I started doing small, odd jobs for money about the time I was 7 or 8, and by 9, I was babysitting for anyone in the neighborhood for 25 cents an hour. In 1986, my take-home pay was $685. My expenses included a $10 monthly pledge to the church's capital campaign at that time, and a donation to the offering plate of $5 each week. So a few weeks ago, my sister Lynn came to stay with me so she could visit her son. Lynn and I have had a very strained relationship for the better part of our lives. But on that particular Sunday, we shared a deeply personal and cathartic conversation, and at one point she said to me, "Thank you for sharing that with me, Mimi." And we both cried. And then I recounted a story to her about when we were growing up that was dedicated to not sharing. So one night in 1973, both my parents were out and I was left in charge of my siblings. Because of the oil crisis, my father always set the thermostat to 64 degrees, so it was freezing. It was colder in my house than it is here. It was the same year that inflation was out of control at 6.2%. Gas prices were soaring. The country was meshed in a huge political scandal, and scenes of a war and more protests were on the nightly news. There were race riots over school desegregation and busing. A mass murder of 7 people took place at a Howard Johnson's motel in New Orleans. America and Russia threatened a nuclear war over Syria, and the Supreme Court had just ruled on a landmark case making abortion a constitutional right. My father worried about money. My mother worried about the state of the world. I worried about what time the Carol Burnett show was coming on. I had recently purchased my very own Sony television, which was like this big, for $175. I was so excited that night to get to watch the Mod Squad because my parents were gone. In what was likely an effort just to get warm, my sister Lynn wanted to get into my bed and watch my TV. And I said no. That Sony was the one and only thing I owned, and I didn't want to share it. Lynn had a very short temper, and in her anger with me, she went upstairs to our shared bedroom and snapped off the TV antenna, rendering the small Sony useless. She then reappeared, waving that piece of skinny, broken metal in my face with a deep sense of justice. Violence ensued. Young Ted grabbed baby Claire and ran into another room to escape the sister fight of the century. It was a hair-pulling, shrieking beatdown. And once I wrestled the antenna back from my sister's hand, I used it as a weapon to scrape her face. Yeah. As I finished recounting that story to Lynn, she said she had forgotten about it altogether. But I could still see the almost invisible scar on her face, a 50-year-old reminder of how selfish and cruel I was by not sharing something as small as the use of a television. I, like you, am still learning more about how to share when life is hard and resources seem so scarce. I could not have predicted that by 2022, sharing personal details would become so widely popular through snaps and chats and tweets. We all share all the time now, and yet the last bastion of being private revolves around money. Money, talking about it, sharing it, makes us really uncomfortable. And often we avoid hard conversations, even here, because we don't want to be misunderstood, or we just don't want to share our feelings. Many of the problems that took place in 1973 are still with us, and they will require our time, attention, and even money to solve. Craig and I share our money with Lake Street Church because this is the one place we feel we might actually have a small positive impact on our community. Pledging actually gives me hope. And it's my hope that you too can find ways to share your money by pledging to Lake Street Church so we can all do more together. Pledge Sunday is October 23rd, but early sharing is encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. And now it is time for our offering. We've got the plates in the back. If you prefer to do that physically, you can do that on the way out. Or we have the QR code in the bulletin. If you're online, there may be a link that appears in the chat. Yes, thank you.
Station
Holy One, we lift up these offerings of time, energy, attention, and money, and we beg for your wisdom to use them to your purposes. Blessed be, and amen.
Our call to commitment today from a liturgy of joyous rebellion, a rite for rededication to the cause by Cláudio Carvalhaes. Family in the struggle, gathered together in the spirit of joyous rebellion, I invite you to proclaim your commitment to the liberation of all people and the restoration of the planet, and to renounce all obstacles that stand in your way. Do you renounce greed, the love of wealth, and all capitalism's empty promises? If so, please say, "We renounce them." Do you renounce oppression, structural and internal, and all the forces that keep us from living liberated lives, dedicated to the liberation of all? Do you renounce the fear, structural? One moment. Do you renounce the fear that dwells in you, all its insecurities, those things that draw you away from confronting your own oppression, loving your own neighbor, and building power for the sake of a liberated world? Do you renounce all answers to the cry of the oppressed that would belittle and chastise, like the saying, "Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps," knowing that when we've been stripped of our boots, the answer is never isolated individual acts, but structural, communal, and organized change, and knowing that together we are never alone. Do you renounce all ideologies that would claim that some deserve to thrive, while others, based on culture, class, creed, or nation of origin, deserve a prison or a grave, a deportation or a desert wall? Do you renounce the destruction of the earth and its resources, the devaluation of nature, and the denial of climate change, as the planet is sacrificed for human greed, leading to pending and unimaginable calamity? Do you renounce racism and nationalism? Do you renounce sexism and ableism? Do you renounce xenophobia and elitism? Do you renounce homophobia, classism, and religious sectarianism? Do you resist structural manifestations of all these things, promising to fight them within and all around us? Do you renounce any society or economy structured around the purpose of benefiting a few, while the many at the bottom are sacrificed for a bottom line? Do you renounce all these things? With all your heart, soul, strength, and mind? While we have your back and you have ours, as we march toward liberation and life for all creation, do you renounce them? Do you renounce them? Do you renounce them? Do you renounce them? We renounce them. Then, in the spirit of joyous rebellion and in the presence of one another, may we work together as a collective to fight oppression in all its forms, to build power with each other in configurations and coalitions yet unimagined. May we end oppression, empower the powerless, and lift the lowly in love, so that together we might tear the tyrants from their thrones and create a world where the earth is alive and all people are able to eat. Blessed be.